We have some really outstanding speakers today, and their bios are in the program, but if you really want to get to know them, because they are so incredibly accomplished, we advise you to go online and look at more. Our first speaker today is Alec Baum. He is the co-funder of something called Track Trump. You think that came out of Grand Central Station? I never heard of that before, but at any rate, he's going to tell us all about it. He's got an interesting background. He's a Yale graduate, and he hails from Texas. And he majored in Far East study. In fact, he worked for J.P. Morgan in their Hong Kong office. Then he came back to the United States. And it says here, he worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Maybe we'll get some Monday morning quarterbacking here. It's going to be very interesting. But he has approached this thing in a totally nonpartisan way. And he's going to tell us about accountable government, what's happened in the first 100 days, and what to expect. Hold your questions and answers until after the speaker has finished. So Alec Baum, come on up and enlighten us, please. Thank you. Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. It's my pleasure and honor to be here and share a little bit of what I've been working on for the past 100 days. So Track Trump is a nonpartisan digital dashboard, and our job has been to sort of look at what's actually been changing on the policy level and record it in a dashboard, which I'll show you in a second. But in the spirit of nonpartisan, I thought I would open with a little bit from a very respected nonpartisan source, Saturday Night Live. Very timely. In the last sketch, Mr. Baldwin as President Trump is worrying about the 100 days, and he's wondering. He asks Pence, "Read me again from the list of my accomplishments," and Pence takes a deep breath and opens this big thing and says, "Nominated Neil Gorsuch," and then snaps it shut. And this is funny because it points at a certain interpretation of the past 100 days, which is that certain big publicized legislative initiatives have failed and there have been setbacks. But if you sort of laugh unthinkingly at this joke and think that nothing has changed, you're sort of missing the picture. So this presentation is going to go on a lot of topics. It's going to be broad and thin. Hopefully we can dive deep into a lot of the topics that I touch upon. But really a lot of things have been going on. One of the reasons, or another thing that's accurate about this is 100 days, whether it's sort of this myth or whatever, is a preoccupation of presidents. So I thought I'd spend 30 seconds or so just briefly wondering why. According to historians, it started in the 30s with FDR being able to pass completely groundbreaking legislation in response to the Great Depression. So much so that by the time JFK was in office, he was already trying to combat that media obsession. He very famously said, you know, what we can achieve here can't be done in 100 days, can't be done in 1,000 days. Perhaps it can't even be done in our lifetime. So you can tell he's already trying to fight that 100 days myth. And then going to President Obama, we sort of have a replay of the 30s. Instead of the Great Depression, it's the Great Recession. And then we have nearly $1 trillion stimulus bill passed in the first 100 days of the Obama presidency. So obviously this is something that is on every president's mind. It's certainly on Trump's mind. I woke up this morning to a tweet from Trump actually about the 100 days, calling it a ridiculous metric. So clearly he doesn't care that much about it. So coming off the Hillary campaign, a group of friends and I were wondering, how can we add a voice to the media space that cuts through the noise, where we can create a bipartisan platform and talk about what's actually going on? We thought this was really important for two primary reasons. One is that Donald Trump, his candidacy represented a hodgepodge of ideology. He wasn't a traditional Republican or Democrat. He was sort of all over the map. And also, he's a person of sort of flying rhetoric. Sometimes his positions change. He's only human. So we tried to nail him down on promises, which was a little bit tough to do, except that in October, before he was elected, he released a contract to the American voter, listing promises, things he actually wanted to do. So we extracted those promises, put them into little buckets of policy categories, and then we created a website where you can, I'll show you the little layout. So this is a landing page. Regardless of what you want to track, you can click on the icon that corresponds to the policy category. And we have two views. We have his promises corresponding to trade. And every time something changes, whether it's a movement in Congress or an executive order that's issued, we update based on that specific promise, and then we list the promises that are kept, that are in progress, and I guess the word failed is a little harsh, but things that he's decided to change. That way you can scroll through really quickly and visualize what's going on. Is he being true to his word? Sort of a report card of sorts. Then we also do a daily roundup where we summarize the events of the day and we put it alongside our updates. So going back to that little sketch, right, the ha-ha moment was, oh, he's only nominated Neil Gorsuch. But as we turn to our first policy category, and if we reflect about what's happened over the past 100 days, and certainly in Southern California, we know that a lot of things have been going on. So just down the list, an update, so buckle your seatbelts, we're just gonna go through everything that's happened. And we're gonna touch on it. So maybe I'm putting a seed for future conversation. Either way, the wall, which is a marquee promise during the campaign, the status is it's a big appropriations, the two things, appropriations fight. A conservative estimate is that the wall will cost around $20 billion. So far, the CBP has managed to get around 20 million, 1/1000th of the estimated conservative budget. So that obviously seems like a little bit of a problem for that. And then also it faces a bunch of legal challenges, whether it's from environmental groups or ranchers in Texas. It's a momentous undertaking that's going to be a matter of years. So you're going to see this in the news for a long time. It's not something he can snap his fingers and do in 100 days. Next is deportations. And this is something that the executive branch has a tremendous amount of authority on. And without really changing anything in the law, the timbre of sort of our deportation priorities from president to president can change tremendously. So you've been hearing some anecdotal information about ICE raids. There was an executive order issued on the 25th of January that said we're going to target criminal undocumented individuals, and we're going to expedite their deportation. We've been reading stories about how they're not really caring about deporting nonviolent individuals. So that has definitely been ramped up. And then sanctuary cities, which is such an important topic to Los Angeles. The pledge was take every dollar bill, federal dollar, away from sanctuary cities. What we're actually seeing, though, if you look at the text of the executive order, it instructs the OMB to find all of the federal grant money that is actually legal to take away. So that's one of the big challenges, and that's why certain cities in California and elsewhere are taking this to court and challenging and trying to narrow that definition of what federal money exactly can be taken away. The only credible threat, as I mentioned on the slide, is that Attorney General Sessions has very specifically said that he will want to take away the DOJ's federal funding, which is a pot about $4.1 billion. So big metropolitan areas stand to lose millions of dollars for their police forces. But again, this is being challenged in court. And an interesting thing is Trump's own lawyer, so the government lawyer, said the plaintiffs are overstating the amount of federal funds that could be taken away, because we say cities stand to lose billions, but the government's own lawyer has said actually cities could only lose a couple million apiece. So here we have the government saying in court the loss isn't going to be so devastating. So again, this is something that will be battled out. Again, the travel ban, which also saw a bunch of activism at the airports here at LAX, especially. Probably, not necessarily, the Supreme Court will decide, and that will hinge on two constitutional arguments. One is an Establishment Clause argument saying that the travel ban is discriminatory against Islam and practitioners of Islam. The other is a sort of access to justice, saying that the legal rights of travelers are being infringed upon. And honestly, that will probably go to the Supreme Court and be decided by a 9-person court now that Gorsuch has been affirmed. And then visa reform, which is something that happened in the past couple of days. The idea that this H-1B process needs to be reformed, which could impact hiring, especially in the tech industry here in California. So as you can see, I've already just gone at 1,000,000 miles per hour talking about all that's been done in this field of immigration, and that's just one category. So who's laughing now, SNL? In the realm of trade, this was also rhetorically a really important thing that Donald Trump hammered on again and again in the campaign. But this is an area where we're starting to see a little bit of equivocation and a little bit of reorientation to a more mainstream outlook. So we see that a withdrawal from the TPP, obviously a big thing for the Pacific economy and for Californians in general. But that was one negative action. It was a matter of signing a piece of paper and saying, we're out. So momentous in terms of impact, but again, you're not having to really do that much in terms of what your team is doing. Then currency manipulation. One of the big things he talks about was sort of to ramp up the rhetoric against China, label China a currency manipulator. Now that President Trump is in office, he's seeing China as an important negotiator in this sort of rising tensions with North Korea. So he's backed off of that. And then NAFTA, talking about free trade agreements that he thinks as predatory were being taken advantage of. You've seen that really disappear from the forefront in all these ambitious trade agenda items. On energy and climate, this is a really interesting thing because oftentimes what is in the news is not really going to make the most impact. Of course, everyone is focused on the Paris Climate Accord, but that is only getting all of the countries to the table. What's going to get us to those high goals is the Clean Power Plan that was put in place by President Obama. And this is something that Trump has ordered a review of, and that could be very well dismantled. So whether or not we pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, look to our own enforcement mechanisms, will we actually be able to meet those targets ourselves? And then another important mechanism whereby Trump is able to affect policy change is using the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to one by one cancel out individual regulations. The federal government, which is another policy bucket, this is sort of the drain the swamp category. Trump talked a lot about cleaning up Washington. Really interesting. So a hiring freeze was put into effect in Washington, D.C. And this, I don't know if you know, but it was quietly ended recently. The theory behind this hiring freeze was that the federal workforce was going to reduce via attrition. But then it got some negative press, so they just decided to end it, which I thought was a very interesting sort of about face. And then, of course, a very publicized lobbying ban, talking about, how we're not going to be, how members who work for Trump are not going to be lobbying for foreign powers and things of that nature. And waivers have been granted, though, on an individual basis. So it begs the question, if you have a policy and yet that applies to 100 people or so, but you're granting individual waivers, is there a policy even there? So that's one thing that we have to look at going forward. And sorry to rush, but as you can see, a lot has been done. On the economy, this is something that is going to require a lot of congressional buy-in. So big change is difficult. I'm seeing that my time is up, but as you can see, you guys know the tale. But I'll skip to my conclusions here. You're left with this two competing media narratives, right? You have the left that wants to present Trump as this dolt who really can't do anything, and then you have the right as like this is a very auspicious beginning. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it's incumbent upon all of us to really sweat the details, sweat the small stuff, see Trump as, if you disagree with him, someone who needs to be resisted against, but to the extent that he can be a partner, to reach out and to not to resist simple media caricatures. These are some final takeaways. The idea that federalism is an important thing to consider, except the script has flipped in that it'll be liberal states sort of standing up to federal policy, not the other way around. And that gridlock is alive and well. That not every piece of legislation is going to fly through, even though Republicans control various branches of power. With that, I welcome you to follow us at tracktrump.com, tweet at us at tracktrump, check us out. If you want, what we created this so people could slim down their media diets. Rather than watching MSNBC or Fox News all day, you can just go straight to the source. We tend to only connect to government documents. That way, you're just sort of avoiding the bias. And I know it definitely, reading the government documents rather than watching a cable news show, it definitely lowers my blood pressure. I think it will for you too. Anyway, it's been such a pleasure. Look forward to meeting you, and yeah.
Alec, can you stick around so people can ask you questions during the break?
Yeah, I will.
Because I'm sure people have quite a few questions, so we'll do that during the break. Thank you.
Great.